Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Saturday class with some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Bhavaswah, Tatsavitra Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. Asto Ma Sadgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya. Om Sena Bhavtu, Sena Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we are trying to understand what Rishi Patanjali is telling us through these beautiful Yog Sutras. And we started the second chapter. So the title of the first chapter is Samadhi Pad. And the title of the second chapter is Sadhana Pad. Sadhana. For most of us, we need to do sadhana to attain the Samadhi. Samadhi is the goal for a yoga abhyasi. So what kind of a sadhana we need to do? In the very first verse of the second chapter, in a very condensed way, because that is the style of the sutras, very condensed, precise, to the point. He's telling us what to do for sadhaks like us. He says, Tapahsvadhyayeshvarapranidhanani, Kriya Yoga. So he says we need to do the tapa. Tap means to heat, to shine, to transform. So that means we got to do the practices and follow the disciplines which will lead us to acquire radiance of the body and clarity of the mind. Okay, tap is also translated as penance, austerity. So that really means undertaking the practices that require putting the body and mind through certain kind of a hardship. We have to learn how to expand our endurance, our tolerance to that. And swadhyaya, swa means self. That means our own, pertaining to the inner reality. Adhyaya means study. Adhyaya also means a chapter. So study of the self or study by oneself. We got to understand each and every chapter of our life separately, as well as in relation to each other. So for that, we got to do a very thorough study of ourselves based upon the study of the scriptures. What these rishis are telling us in the scriptures, are we following that or not, according to our stage of life, our chapter of life? There are 4 chapters which are called ashrams also, 4 chapters: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanprastha, and sannyas. Are we living a life according to that chapter or not? Study. Then the third thing he says, Ishwar Pranidhan. Ishwar means guiding and protecting force. Ishwar. Pranidhan means complete surrender. Embracing that power tightly. Having a complete faith in the guiding and protecting power of that absolute reality. Ishwar Pranidhan. Kriya Yoga. Kriya is the action, the effort to move with purpose and goal. And the yoga is the absolutely still state of mind. So that means this is a technical term, Kriya Yoga, given by Rishi Patanjali, which means to put the theory of yoga into practice. It should not just remain a theory. Yoga is not something we just only read or we watch on the screen, somebody else doing yoga, or just listening to somebody's lectures. Ultimately, all this has to come into our life. So that's why the definition of this sutra is the schematic practice of yoga consists of three components: Tapahsvadhyaya and Ishvarapranidhanani. Austerity, self-study, and unshakable faith in the guiding and protective power of God. Or you can say that these are the three steps to self-transformation. It's like an action plan for us. He has given it to us. If we cannot remember all those big terminology, at least we can remember these three things which we need to do. Tapahsvadhyaya Ishvarapranidhanani. So again, this is the first sutra of the second chapter. But it is also a continuation of the last sutra of the first chapter. Even though the scripture is divided into 4 chapters, but still it's a big garland of beautiful gems. We learned in the first chapter in the Samadhi Pad about the Samadhis. According to Rishi Patanjali, Samadhi is the heart of yoga. Because Samadhi is the one which really grants us ultimate freedom. Our freedom from all known as well as unknown causes of sorrow. Because that's what we want to be free of, sorrow. So Samadhi is the foundation of lasting joy, you can say. You can see the smile radiating from a person who has attained Samadhi. It is freedom from fears, freedom from doubts. Because in Samadhi, the mind stands still and it regains its ability to see reality as it is. Because you have made the mind so still, so transparent, and ultimately you have transcended the mind and you can see the reality as it is. And we learned in the first chapter the prerequisites for attaining Samadhi is to become completely free from the charms and temptations of the world and keep our focus on only one single reality, the inner self. That focus should be there. And Rishi Patanjali said the prerequisite is establishing the virtue of dispassion, vairagya. If we cannot establish ourselves in vairagya, we are not fit to practice yoga as described. Because a disturbed, distracted, stupefied mind is not fit for reaching Samadhi. Because this is not the state which we can buy or beg. We have to do sadhana for it. So it is reachable only by a sadhak who has cultivated a one-pointed and completely still mind. So that's why this vairagya is needed and abhyas is needed. 2 prerequisites. Charms and temptations of the world agitate our minds. And an agitated mind is bound to be disturbed and distracted. Unfortunately, living with a disturbed, distracted, and stupefied mind has become the norm for most of us. So that's why reaching a state of samadhi is beyond the scope of most people. So now the question is, should we simply forget about practicing yoga because we do not have a disciplined, focused, purified, and perfectly still mind? Answer is no. These rishis, they are so compassionate, so big-hearted. They keep on coming down to our levels and helping us. They hold our hand. They encourage us. They keep on giving us simpler and simpler practices. And that's what I see in this verse. Because the practices, the samadhis which he talked about, those are far-fetched. So the practices which we'll see in this chapter are for people like us. Because our mind does get disturbed, it does get distracted, but we do want to attain samadhi. But we should have that urge to attain samadhi though. If we don't have that urge, that strong desire, then even these practices don't mean anything. But these are doable practices. First of all, we got to remember that we are all endowed with limitless capacities. Our dormant potentials are immense. Even the most unhealthy person with the right planning and sustained effort can become healthy in body and clear in mind, according to these yogis. So that's why, according to Rishi Patanjali, we need to put together a plan to discover our core strength. And executing that plan systematically is called Kriya Yoga. Remember that, because Kriya Yoga has been used differently later on in today's yoga schools. But Rishi Patanjali is the first one who used Kriya Yoga for these 3 steps. Tapahsvadhyayeshvarapranidhanani. These are the 3 components of Kriya Yoga. Tap. Tap helps us assess our physical capacity. Can we endure? Can we tolerate? Or do we just become weak and start holding on to the crutches? Tap. Swadhyaya, our mental ability and intellectual grasp. That is Swadhyaya. Ishwar Pranidhan allows us to see the depth of our emotional maturity. So together, these 3 help us to see our strengths and weaknesses. And with proper guidance, they will help us design a course of practice that is perfect for our overall growth as well as development. Let's look at all these 3 components more closely. Tap. I told you very loosely, you can call it austerity. But whenever we think of austerity, it normally is associated with strict self-denial. Fasting, owning no material objects, living in a cave or a hut only with the base necessities. But tap, according to Lord Krishna and Rishi Patanjali, is little different. Tap is not a torture. It's not a hardship. We go through the tap to awaken the dormant energy in us. A person who undertakes such a practice is called Tapahsvi. So that means willful renunciation of pleasure from this Maya is tapa. Because you are looking for spiritual enhancement, not drowning in Maya. That's why it's a tapa. And that's where the energy comes. So at a practical level, for students like us, tap is that we got to gather the fire within. We got to overcome the tamsikta, sloth and inertia. We got to become active, not being dependent on others for your salvation. Taking charge of your own destiny, putting your intellectual knowledge into practice. It's almost like when you want to put a wheel into motion, you have to face the resistance caused by inertia in the beginning stages. So that's how our body is too. Our body doesn't want to go through those exercises. It will resist, mind will resist, body will resist. And there will be some kind of a discomfort. So you have to overcome that discomfort. Enduring this discomfort is tapa. Mind says, stay in the bed at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. But telling your mind and body, no. My guru says, get up before the sun rises. Do your cleansings, do your meditation, do your prayers. That is tapa. So it's not a torture. It is a sticking to that discipline which you said, I will do. So enduring this discomfort is tapa. When you commit yourself to this discomfort without a true understanding of the higher goal and purpose of the practice, your mind will definitely perceive it as a torture. And sooner or later, that kind of a torture becomes uncomfortable, unbearable. And sooner or later, you will drop out. But if you remember what the goal is, that's why faith is needed. You have the goal, you have a faith, and you know why I'm doing it. It becomes enjoyable. You look forward to getting up in the morning and going on your meditation seat or on your asana seat. People who are not familiar with the inner world, sometimes they are under the grip of spiritual insanity, actually. But if you know why you are undertaking a practice, what its goal and objective is, how it can help you remove the tamsikta or the inertia of the body or the confusion of the mind, how it can infuse your heart with the light of higher reality, then enduring any hardship, you will know that that's a great opportunity. Then tap becomes a source of lasting joy. So how do you practice tap? The first level of practice involves restoring your body to health. If you are living an unwholesome lifestyle, we need to adopt a healthy diet, proper exercise, bringing regularity in our sleeping pattern is a big tapa. These days, even shutting your phone off, putting it on the charger in the other room, that could be a tapa too. Because we have become so conditioned to have the phone next to us. Deeply rooted habits do not like change. That's why summoning the willpower, sticking to your decision, adopting a healthy lifestyle, that is a beginning point for tapa. Even this level of tapa will bring the ecology of the body to a state of balance, you will see. Then practice of pranayama. That will take your tapa to the next level. Because practice of pranayama destroys the veil that hides the light. We'll learn that from Rishi Patanjali Sutras. So the fire of breath burns not only physical impurities and the toxins, but also the mental impurities. Spending enough time in pranayama is must for a sadhak. It also helps us to purify and strengthen our nervous system, which is very important. We got to learn how to awaken our dormant forces of consciousness at different energy centers, which are called chakras. To learn how to roast the seeds of our karmas deposited deep in our chitta. Doing all that is tapa. And other forms of tapa include mantra japa. Guru says, recite the mantra. Constantly with each breath, you keep on reciting the mantra, that is a tapa. Because mind says, I want to think about the world. I want to think about my children. I want to think about my stock portfolio. Guru says, think about the God only. That's a tapa. Restraining the mind. Selfless service is a tapa. All our life, we just wanted to do what's in it for me. Even when we do something good for others, we want to see, do I get a bigger piece of pie or not in that? True selfless service, that is a tapa. Practicing truth in thought, speech, and action, that is a tapa too. All of this will help us expand our physical capacity, and we will experience limitless powers which are deposited in our body and in our mind also. Tapa. Then the second component of the Kriya Yoga is Swadhyaya. Very loosely translated as a self-study. This is Swadhyaya, Swadhyaya. Self-study. So that means to reflect on yourself, to reflect on who we are, what our true nature is, where we have come from, and what is our purpose of being over here right now. How do we relate to others? Because there must be some kind of a reason we come across with other people. Some people lifelong, some people just few years or few hours or few minutes. There's always a purpose. What our duties are in relation to others. What did we do in the past? And what are we doing now, and the consequence of what we are doing? How can we fulfill our life? How can we use the gifts God has given it to us? Reflecting on all of it is Swadhyaya. Because self-reflection finds a purpose and flows in the right direction with a definite goal. When it is accompanied by a sacred mantra also. Because without mantra jap, self-reflection can degenerate into an intellectual exercise only. So self-study, so we got to study ourselves, but we got to study the right kind of scriptures also. Otherwise, we really don't know how to study ourselves. Scriptures which really teach us, show us that our focal point should be on that ultimate goal. Those scriptures are called Moksha Shastra. Like Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Yog Visheshta, and Yog Sutras itself. We'll see the last chapter, the 4th chapter is called Kavalya Pad. What is that Kavalya? Kavalya means only, Keval. And what is that Keval? Only Atma, which is nothing but a part of Paramatma. That's moksha. So moksha shastras. Because these scriptures set the guidelines and ensure that the direction of our self-reflection is correct or not. So that's why studying the scriptures and studying yourself hand in hand. So that kind of a self-study helps us expand our mental ability and refine our intellectual grasp. And in turn, it empowers us with the conviction that the path we are walking on is straight and legitimate. We got to have a love for the path on which we are walking on. And the third component, Ishwarapranidhanani, surrender to God. That's like a very loose translation. But sometimes this translation gives us the impression of giving up, become inactive, passively, and passing the responsibility for ourselves unto God. Such a notion of surrendering to God is misleading and completely wrong. First step in practicing Ishwarapranidhan requires making an effort to comprehend the true meaning of Ishwar. Ishwar means unrestricted, unfettered, divine power. It is not only almighty, but also all-knowing. It is auspicious, beginningless, and endless. It is all-pervading, the eye of the soul. So having an unshakable faith in the guiding and the practicing power of God is the essence of Ishwar Pranidhan. So that means we got to infuse our actions with this faith. So first knowing what Ishwar is, then doing your duties, having a faith in God, that God. That is a second step. Okay, so it's not just surrendering and doing nothing. It's knowing and doing. And then the third step is also there. Surrendering the fruits of our actions and not being affected by the results of our actions. That is the third step. Or I should say final step. So knowing what God is, knowing and doing what our duties are, and when the result comes, do not get affected by the results, good or bad, positive or negative. Because at the time of the positive, we jump up. When something goes wrong, we just go into the low mood, and not only that, we start blaming God, not getting affected. That is a Ishwar Pranidhan. Ishwar Pranidhan is the final test of whether or not we are living in the presence of God. It helps us assess how mature we are in our beliefs, how resolute we are in our decisions, and how strong we are in our decisions. And how strong we are in removing ourselves in favor of God. There cannot be a more active way of performing one's duty than Ishwar Pranidhan. Okay, if somebody says Ishwar Pranidhan means don't do anything, they really do not know what Ishwar Pranidhan is. Work hard with a surrendered attitude in the full realization that we are simply an instrument in the hands of the one who is almighty, omniscient, and the Lord of all that exists. So the schematic plan of yoga has three elements. Tapahsvadhyayeshvarapranidhanani. So remember, if you want to summarize it, Tapa helps us to detoxify our body. Swadhyay nurtures our senses. And Ishwar Pranidhan purifies our mind. So they are helping our instruments which we need to use to attain the highest. After that, we can cultivate a higher degree of endurance, fortitude. Then what happens is obstacles, which we learned earlier in the previous chapter, because on this path, there could be many, many obstacles. Obstacles could be disease, procrastination, laziness, doubt. They begin to lose their grip. So practice of yoga that leads to the stillness of the mind becomes natural and spontaneous. So I hope with this little information, you got a little bit more understanding of Kriya Yoga. Tapahsvadhyayeshvarapranidhanani. So now, in the next verse, verse number 2 of the second chapter, he says samadhibhavanarthah, kleshatanookaranarthah. Samadhi is the highest state of spiritual absorption. bhavana, notion, to induce. Artha means meaning or objective. So samadhi bhavanarth means to induce a state of total mental absorption or stillness. Kleshatanookaranarthah. Klesh means affliction. Affliction over here means the source of bondage. Tanukaran, to weaken, like a minimization or process of eliminating. Arth means goal. So this big word, kleshatanookaranarthah, means the objective of minimizing the source of the affliction. Cha means and. So the objective of Kriya Yoga, the schematic practice of yoga, is to induce samadhi and minimize afflictions. So if somebody says, why you want to go through Tapahsvadhyayeshvarapranidhanani? Why are you studying? Haven't you studied enough? Haven't you gone through enough meditations and sevas and all that? You can tell them that my objective is to induce samadhi, to become one. Because samadhi is the goal of yoga. Samadhi is the road to enlightenment. Samadhi is the culmination of spiritual achievement. And you can say the heart of yoga also. Samadhi is the pristine state of mind. In the state of samadhi, a yogi has an opportunity to see himself clearly. Otherwise, no matter what kind of a scope we have, telescope or microscope, or these glasses, we really don't know ourselves. This is the scope yogis have given it to us, the samadhi, to know yourself, who you are. Otherwise, we just identify ourselves with the name which was given to us when we were born. Or we identify ourselves with the degrees which we have attained, or the body which we have. But samadhi really takes us to that level where we know in reality who we are. That's why samadhi is important. In samadhi, the self-realization dawns, and a yogi realizes his true nature, who he is, what his relationship is with the absolute reality. He also knows what the relationship to God also. What is the relationship with the world also, matter and energy also. The totality of the truth pertaining to his core being and the vast universe that exists within his mind, the inner world, and at the same time the world which is outside also. It's clearly visible to this yogi. And we saw that that was the subject matter of the first chapter. But now Rishi Patanjali is telling us, practice Kriya Yoga so that you can attain samadhi. We got to have that kind of an atmosphere which is conducive to attaining the state of samadhi. Samadhi is a process, the mind's journey to reconnect its scattered faculties and collect its lost assets. As you are practicing, you will see that each step of this journey furnishes your mind with the means and the tools to undertake the next step. This is what happens. You know what to do and what not to do when you're in tune with this. The journey continues until the mind reaches the final destination. And then the process comes to an end. And the mind rests in a state of equanimity. So the practice of Kriya Yoga empowers the mind both to begin the journey and to complete it also. This is what this sutra is telling us. So the purpose of Kriya Yoga is to induce samadhi. So if somebody says, why are you doing the tapa? Why are you still studying? Why do you keep on worshipping? Because I haven't reached where the yogis promise that I'll reach. I still have to study. So Kriya Yoga is a practitioner's friendly path. By committing ourselves to a structured discipline of tapa, we detoxify our body, make our limbs and organs strong and energetic, increase our stamina. So that's why we minimize our chances of falling prey to inertia, the sloth, or procrastination. We make lifestyle changes in steps. And with the Swadhyaya, we learned that we can make a realistic assessment of our current circumstances, decide to bring changes at a pace which is manageable. And then cultivating firm reliance on Ishwarapranidhanani, we exercise our willpower while enjoying the virtue of contentment. That's what happens. Contentment comes when you have faith in God. So in this sutra, Patanjali is making it clear that it is only through a well-defined practice of Kriya Yoga, Tapahsvadhyayeshvarapranidhanani, we can reach a state of equanimity. Overcome the roving tendencies of the mind, have a healthy body, breath, and mind, cultivate the virtues of fortitude, endurance, and self-endeavor. So these are the fruits of Kriya Yoga, which will help us turn our mind inward and become aware of our core being. That is a Samadhi Bhavana. Samadhi Bhavana. So the Samadhi induced by the practice of Kriya Yoga automatically begins its work deep in the interior of our Chitta. Chitta is the deeper layers of our mind. Emerging from the practice of Kriya Yoga directly blocks the functions of avidya, which is the root cause of all the kleshas, afflictions. What does avidya mean? Lack of clarity. Incomplete or distorted understanding. That's avidya. In the state of samadhi, the mind is still, calm, clear, tranquil. And this tranquility is the one which helps us attain and retain our inner equanimity. Deep and lasting maturity comes. It's easier to have a right perception of ourselves and others. That's why Lord Krishna mentioned several times samta, samatvam. He said, Samatvam yoga uchyate. Equanimity is the one which is called yoga. Equanimity helps keep our vision unalloyed. And from that kind of a vision, the afflictions, they get destroyed. They get eliminated. And we learn about the affliction. Rishi Patanjali doesn't leave us over here just with afflictions alone. He will define what those afflictions are. Like egoism, attachment, aversion, fear. Long chain of turmoil arising from them. They will lose their power. We'll see that in 25 sutras that follow, Rishi Patanjali is explaining how lack of understanding is the source of our inner unrest. How, in order to overcome this inner unrest, we labor to know our true nature. How our inability to know who we are and what our relationship is with others breeds an unending chain of suffering. And ultimately, how the phenomena of birth and death is propelled by the inherent desire of the soul to know itself in its purity as well as perfection. So try to understand, and not just only intellectually understanding, practice this also. Tapahsvadhyayeshvarapranidhanani. Those are the foundations. So we got to have a strong foundation so that we can have answers to all these questions. So next 25 verses, you will see that. How much detail, how beautifully he has explained it to us. First, he'll tell us these 5 afflictions. Then in each affliction, he will spend a verse, further defining it for us, what avidya is, what rag is, what dvesh is, what abhinivesh is. He will tell us all. How fortunate we are to have all of this right in front of us. But practice we must do. Rishi Patanjali is not going to come here and do tapasya for us. We got to do it. Swadhyaya we have to do. Faith in God, understanding of God, we have to do. If we don't want to suffer anymore. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.